Today we're going to do something really fun. We're going to take our Jelly Roll Race quilt and we're going to cut it up and turn it into a quilted ottoman. I can't wait to show you how to do it. I hope you guys are feeling brave today. We're gonna try something new and I think you're really going to enjoy it. To start off with, I made this large ottoman using a Jelly Roll Race quilt. And so this is what inspired this pattern. The pattern actually includes this large size as well as a smaller size. So be sure to pick that up and it'll walk you through all of the details. But first up, we need to make our Jelly Roll Race quilt. So I use this beautiful Kaffe Classics Meadow Jelly Roll by Free Spirit. It's all these beautiful greens. And then I use one of the shot cottons for my backing. You're gonna need 3 1/4 yards of your backing fabric. And so I did this exactly like Jenny's Jelly Roll Race tutorial. The only thing I changed is I didn't add a border since we're just gonna cut this up. So here is my finished Jelly Roll Race quilt. And I just did the arc doodle pattern all over it for the quilting to hold it all together. When I do the Jelly Roll Race, if you're not familiar, let's just talk a little bit about that. So you're gonna open up your Jelly Roll, and I'll move this out of the way so you can see. And you're gonna take that rubber band off, and then you are going to lay it out exactly as it comes off the roll. So just like so. And then we're gonna pick up one after the other, and we're gonna join those just like you would your binding. So we're gonna join that on a 45. So let me go ahead and just show you how to do that. And so I'm just gonna take 2 of my strips, and I'm just gonna lay them print sides together, like so. And we are gonna sew from this point to this point. So let's go ahead and do that. So you can draw a line here, you can press a line if you want. I am just going to eyeball it because I feel pretty comfortable with that. And so now that you've done that, you'll take this end and fold it so it's right sides up, and you'll grab your next strip and you'll add it in the exact same way. Right sides together, and we're gonna sew it on the 45. You'll wanna look at some of the different ways that Jenny has made the Jelly Roll Race over the years, because you can do lots of different things. You could set little 2.5 inch squares in between. You can sew them straight across. You really can just kind of let your heart decide what you wanna do. But the idea is you're gonna sew all of these strips one after the other, end to end to end, and then you're gonna fold that in half, sew those together, fold that in half, sew those together. Be sure to tune into the video because it's really fun. So now that you have all of that done, we can go back to our finished quilt top. So let's move this out of the way. So once you have your quilt all done, you're gonna go ahead and have that quilted. So you'll need the backing that's a little bit larger than your top. You'll have the whole thing quilted, and I've gone ahead and just trimmed off all of my excess batting and backing close to the edge, but not exact. And we're not gonna bind it or anything like that, because now this is essentially our fabric to make our ottoman. So we are just gonna cut this up, which I know can be a little bit scary and nerve-wracking. And I have to be honest, when I was playing with this at home, I was a little bit terrified. But now you can see I've made multiples. I'm a little bit hooked, and I think you're really going to like this. So I based the size of this pattern on the least amount of waste possible from this Jelly Roll Race, because I didn't want us to go to all this trouble still piecing a quilt and have a bunch of, waste left over. So mine measured roughly 48 by 64. And so I knew that the biggest I could possibly get is a 24-inch square across the top, but I wanted to give myself room to trim it down in case it wasn't exactly even on my edges, since I hadn't squared it up exactly. So I went with 23-inch squares for my top and bottom. And then the rectangles actually measure 20 inches tall by 23 inches across. So now let's go ahead and lay this out, and we're gonna mark out all of those measurements on this quilt top. I'm actually just gonna use a Sharpie, which is what I used at home. You're gonna be cutting through this, so you're not gonna see it anywhere, and it's permanent, so it's not gonna bleed. And so let's get that started. We'll lay this all out, and I'll meet you back here, and we'll make some measurements. All right, so I've moved the extension table off of my machine just to give me a little bit more room to work here. And I'm actually gonna start by folding this in half. This is the short side of the quilt top over here. And so I've got the length going out this way. And I'm gonna mark on the backing just so you guys can see really well what I'm doing. And I didn't worry about where the seams landed on the quilt top itself. So this is exactly how I did it. And so I have this as straight as I possibly can. It ended up pretty square, which is always nice. I'm just gonna straighten this all out. And so now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use my big ruler and I'm gonna come from this top corner here and I'm gonna measure down 23 inches. And so I know this is a 24-inch ruler. And so you can see this one is just a little bit smaller, so I'm just barely going to have to trim off this little bottom edge. And so I'm just going to make a mark right here. And then I'm going to come up here from the corner and I'm going to measure down 23 inches. And I'm going to make a mark. And I'm going to do the same thing on this other side. 23 inches. There we go. Okay, so now I know that this should be 23 inches straight across. And so I can cut straight through this either with my rotary cutter or my scissors. I'm going to use my rotary cutter for this one. Make sure you have a nice sharp blade. I'm going to make sure my ruler is nice and straight. And we're just going to cut right through. Just like so. First cut is done. That's the scariest part. Now you're good. So now I'm going to turn this. Again, making sure everything is lined up. And now that I've cut this first cut, I can really use my mat and just help make sure that things are staying straight and neat and lined up. And so let me just do some adjusting. And it looks like I'm going to cut this right on the 35-inch mark of my mat for me to get this 23-inch square, because I'm starting at the 12. 12 plus 23 is 35. Double check your math. Measure twice, cut once, right? So just make sure my ruler is straight here. And again, we're going to make this big cut. There we go. Ta-da! Our two big rectangles are done. Got some threads right there. But look at that. We have those two ready to go. I've got this little bit of my batting that's showing here. That's going to get caught in the seam, so I'm not worried about that at all. And so now I can set these aside and we'll go ahead and prepare the side panels. All right, so the top and bottom are these two squares that I've set aside. So now we're going to cut the 4 side panels. And the measurements we're looking for on that is 23 inches wide by 20 inches tall. So we're going to start, since this is our straight edge that we just cut, I'm just going to go ahead and make sure it's still lined up on my mat as best as it can be. Sometimes they get a little bit wonky, so just take your time and readjust. There we go. So we're just going to measure down 20 inches from that straight edge, and we're going to make a mark just like we did before. And so I've got my ruler here. This is the 20-inch line. And I'm just going to put a little dot at this back end, and then I'll slide up here and do the same. So just like so. Now, one thing I would recommend checking before you cut this is just double check and make sure that you can still get the same size from the bottom. And so there's my 20 inches. I know I'm just going to have this little tiny bit of waste. That's exactly what I'm looking for. So before you cut, double check that, because you could just essentially split this one in half to get all the sizes that you need. But we're going to go with 20 inches. And so I've gone ahead, marked both the top and the bottom, and now we can cut this straight edge. Let's make sure I've got it all lined up. There we go. And now again, we can turn this. Just gonna make sure everything looks good. It does. Have it lined up straight on my mat. There we go. And we are coming over 23 inches because these are 20 by 23 inch rectangles. So again, we're just shaving this tiny little bit off this edge. There's that. And now we'll repeat that to get 2 more of these rectangles out of this bottom section. All right, all of the scary stuff is done. We have made all of our cuts, and I want to show you, this is all the waste that we have. So even though you worked super hard and you pieced this Jelly Roll Race quilt top, you have very little waste, and we're gonna have this awesome project to show for it. So just to reiterate, we have 4 20 by 23 inch rectangles. So I have these stacked up here. And then we have 2 23 inch squares, top and bottom, and our side panels here. So the next step is on every single one of these, I'm gonna notch out a 1/4 inch square in each of the corners just to reduce some bulk. And so I literally just eyeballed this by taking my scissors and just snipping a little square in each one. And so I'll do that on all 4 corners of all of my pieces. So let's just go ahead and do that really quick. And then I'll meet you back here when it's all done. All right, so we've notched out that 1/4 inch square in each of the corners on all of our pieces. And so now we are going to sew the short sides of our rectangles. So the 20 inch sides, we're gonna sew each of those together so that we have basically one big tube that is our center section. So let's go ahead and get all of this over here at the machine, move some of this out of the way. And then we will just start by laying 2 of these right sides together. And I can line up those little notches that I cut out. And then I'm just gonna sew a 1/4 inch seam all the way down. And I do back stitch at the start and stop. There we go, just lining up the ends. If you need to pin or clip, be sure to do that, whatever makes you most comfortable. And then back stitch again. Now I can open this up. I'll add one more here. And we'll just keep going until we have these all sewn together. All right, we will add one more, and then we'll close this up into a big loop. Again, just lining up those notched corners, back stitching, and sewing all the way down. All right, now I'll just pull these 2 ends together, move all that bulk out of the way, and do this final seam of the middle section. I always like to take a few stitches there at the beginning and then go back and line everything up. And just zoom down the side. And then make sure my ends are matching, and we're good to go. There we go, we have our whole middle section done. I'm just gonna flip this out so you can see how it's starting to come together. Look at that. We've got our 4 panels. I do want to point out that very rarely do these seams match up exactly. I actually did pretty good on this one. I'm a little bit impressed with myself, but I just didn't worry about that at all because when we add the top and bottom, they're gonna be going different directions anyway. But you know, just have fun with it. It's okay if it's off. I love all of these beautiful bright cave florals that just are gonna add a lot of punch to the room when we get it all done. So now we get to worry about our zipper. So the first things first, I've got this big green zipper. We're gonna set this section aside for just a little bit, and we are gonna take one of our top squares. And so what I did is I lined this up along the edge. This zipper is larger than I need, and so I'm actually just going to trim this down. I think this is a 24-inch zipper. It is, and I can trim this down to probably 20 for what I need. So I'm just gonna make sure the head of my zipper is out of the way. And then I will use my ruler and my rotary cutter wherever I've hidden it. There it is. And we'll just trim this down. So I'm going to trim about 4 inches off of that. Make sure I'm good to go. I think that looks great. So I am going to go ahead and turn this around, and I'm going to cut off this big metal piece just because I don't want to risk sewing through that later. And so I'm just actually going to go ahead and trim that right off. There we go. And so now I'm going to take this to the machine, and I'm going to sew across both of these ends just to secure it and make sure that my zipper doesn't accidentally slide off somewhere in the process. That can be fixed, but it's easier if we just make sure it doesn't happen. This is a nylon zipper, so we can sew right across it. So I'm just gonna back stitch a few times on this side and then turn around to this side as well, making sure that stays exactly lined up and just sewing over the end. There we go. So now we have that secure, and we don't have any of those metal stoppers in the way that we can risk running into later. And so now we're going to take one of the long sides of our 23-inch square, and we're going to place this right sides down. And I just kind of eyeball and center this in the space. Make sure that the zipper head is away from where I'm going to stitch. And let me grab some pins because I do want to pin this in place. You could use clips if you want, whatever you prefer. I just want to make sure I've got it even across the top. And I don't want to have to fight with this later. So this would be another opportunity if you have a special zipper foot for your machine, you could swap that out. The foot that I have on the Accomplish is really narrow, so I can do this without changing it. So I'm just going to pin across here in just a few places just to make sure it's nice and secure. Just put a couple more in. And one more. There we go. Oops. Get that one to go through, a little dull. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to sew, about 1/4 inch away from this opening, and you can see how it goes all the way down. I'm just going to sew about 1/4 inch away, as close as I can get, all the way down this long side of the zipper. And we're going to back stitch at the top and the bottom. So you can see I have this narrow foot, and I can get really close to that edge. So back stitching, and before I get to that pin, I want to move that out of the way. And we're just going to roll down the side here. Just try and make sure it stays up, lined up with the edge of our square. And now that I have gone a little ways, I'm going to keep my needle down, lift my presser foot, and I'm actually going to slide this zipper head up out of the way so I don't have to worry about it anymore. Now we can just continue all the way down. So I have stitched all the way along this long edge. I used white thread just because I wanted to make sure you guys could see against the green, but I would probably use a matching thread both for this stitching and for the top stitching we're about to do. One thing I like to do at this point is just kind of roll this back. And if I don't like how close it is to the zipper, you can come back and take another line of stitches if you want, because I do want this to be as close to that zipper tape edge as possible. So I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to come in just a little bit tighter. Now that I already have this row of stitching, I don't have to worry about pinning it again. And I just want it to be a little bit neater before I top stitch. So let's go ahead and do that. So now I can slide the zipper head all the way the other direction. And we will just do one more line of stitches. And I'm just going to try and be even closer to that opening. Go ahead and move the zipper head the other direction, out of the way. There we go. Now I can roll that back again. That's more what I'm looking for. I just want that really close. You can see how nicely that's going to lay now. And so now that I have that, you can press this if you want. Because of the bulk of the batting, I've found that it doesn't really stay. You kind of just have to make it behave a little bit. And we're going to top stitch right along this edge. So if you want to lengthen your stitch length a little bit, that looks really nice. Again, I would use matching thread that would blend in. I'm going to go ahead and stick with the white for you guys. So I'm just going to lengthen that a bit, roll this under, and I'm starting my stitching right at the edge of my zipper tape. Do one little back stitch, and we are just going to stay as close to that top edge as we can. Pause again, lift my presser foot so I can move this out of the way. It's a great way to break a needle. You don't want to sew too close to the zipper head. All right. And back stitch again. There we go. And you can see how nice that looks. We've got this beautiful finished edge right along this side of the zipper, which is exactly what we're looking for. So now I'm going to open this up a little bit, and we are going to add our zipper to this middle section, just like we did here. And so I just pick one side, since all of the sides measure the same, and we're just going to want to put this face down. And again, we want to make sure that this is centered. So I like to line up my piece. Let me move this out of the way to make sure you guys can see what I'm doing here. I'm lining up these edges, and I can kind of eyeball and make sure that I have just that 1/4 inch overhang on each side. And then we're going to pin in place just like we did before and repeat all of those steps to attach the zipper to the other side. So let's go ahead and put a few pins in, and then we'll do our stitching, flip it over, and do the top stitch. There we go. All right, and now let's take this to the machine. So because you're dealing with even more bulk, since we're adding this to the middle now, just make sure everything is out of the way. You don't want to accidentally sew through more layers than you want. You will be very sad. All right, so since I made that adjustment before, I'm going to go ahead and do this line of stitching a little closer, since I know what I'm looking for. And we are going to back stitch at the start and just zoom all the way down. getting close to that zipper head, so we have to maneuver under here, slide that out of the way again, and then put our presser foot back down. Make sure everything's staying lined up. Almost to the end here. And we're just going to backstitch. All right, so now that I have that, I can flip this over, can zip it up, make sure everything is going to lay nicely. And then we're going to roll this side back and we're going to do that same top stitching that we did before. So let's go ahead and do that and I'll meet you back here when that's all done. All right, that is all done. Our zipper is installed. You can see how nice that looks. We've got our top stitching. It's finished up really close. And so now all we need to do is sew the last little bit of this side and attach this to our whole loop that we made, right? And so I'm actually going to flip this back so that we're looking at the wrong sides again. And we are going to pinch these two edges where the zipper meets. And we're actually going to come back. You can see where that top stitching is. We're just going to kind of curve to catch that bottom edge and then come back and finish off these little sides on both sides of our zipper. And so what that's going to do is it's just going to hide the start and stop of our zipper underneath that seam. And because we have a nylon zipper, we can sew right through it. So I'm just pinching it. I want to make sure you guys can see what I've got here. And we're just going to sew that little bit straight across. So we're going to take that little pinch section. It works out to about no more than 2 inches that we're going to stitch on this side. And we're going to loop through there, just making sure that we stay at that 1/4 inch and finish off in the corner. And so if you need to flip it over, if it's easier to start at the corner and avoid the bulk of the zipper, you can do that, but it's the same idea. And so I'll do that. I'll flip this here because sometimes it's easier to start away from the bulk. So back stitch in that corner, and then we're just going to sew a 1/4 inch until we start to see our zipper stitching, which is right there. And then we're just going to arc a little bit in, just like so, and back stitch over that. There we go. So let me go ahead and flip out this side so you can see kind of what you're looking for. It's just going to catch that zipper and pinch it and finish off that edge, which is exactly what you want. So let's do that same thing on the other side. So we're going to move that bulk out of the way, line up these two ends, pinch it together, and sew and catch that edge of the zipper. Just adding a little bit more security to that, since sometimes zippers can get a lot of abuse. It's where some of the tension goes on a project, right? Okay, lining up that corner, back stitching, making sure this is all staying lined up. And we're going to come down and curve in. All right, perfect. Now that we've done that, we can go ahead and line up the other 3 sides of this square. And so what you're going to do is you're going to match up all of those notches in your corners, and we're just going to start at one side and sew all the way around, and then we'll have the what is essentially the bottom of this Ottoman complete. And so let's go ahead and do that. There we go. The trickiest part about this step is just making sure you don't have any extra bulk in the way. It's really not hard. You're still doing just straight sewing. So we're just lining this up. And as I get closer to this bottom edge, I want to make sure that those little notches are going to meet up. Everything looks good. Back stitch, and then we can rotate and keep going. Now we'll sew this side. Here's our last seam for the bottom of our cube. Just line it all up. Okay. We're getting so close. It's so exciting. Look at that. Oops, helps if I lift the presser foot, right? Okay, so the whole base of our cube is ready to go. It's inside out. You can see here is our zipper on this side. Let me just flip it out so I can show you how this is starting to look, because I think you will be so excited and surprised when you see how simple it is and how neat the corners turn out. It just works out so well. And so there you go. It's really starting to take shape. Our big bean bag ottoman. And so the one thing you want to make sure of, because we're about to close this all up, is that you have your zipper open at least halfway. We are still going to have it wrong sides out, and we're going to add this last square to the top to finish it off. And so just like on the bottom, we're just lining up those notches and we're sewing around all four sides. Again, just make sure your zipper's open so it's easy for you to turn this when it's all done. So let's go ahead, start with this side here. We'll zoom all the way around and I'll meet you back here when it's done. Okay, you guys, that is it. We have finished all of our sewing. So now we just find our zipper and we can flip this right sides out, just like so. This is so exciting. And then you just want to reach in there and poke out all of your corners. Make sure those are laying nicely. And your big floor ottoman is done. So cool. So I just bought these bags of beanbag filling online. I just Googled beanbag filling, and it took 2 big bags that were super full to fill this giant ottoman. It was actually pretty affordable to buy them, so wasn't bad at all. But so it is just full. My kids absolutely love this. They fight over it like every day to sit on and do their homework or watch movies or read a book. It's so fun. So remember, this is the large size. This is using the Jelly Roll Race. I do want to show you, this is the smaller size. And so for this one, I just used yardage. I didn't piece this at all. I just used yardage and then did some all over quilting. So if you have, maybe you have fabric that you love, that you want to have as a home decor project, even just like a crosshatch quilting or straight line quilting would be perfect. And you could do all of it on your domestic machine, Also, if you don't want to quilt it, grab some canvas or something like that, and then you could just make it out of canvas, and it would be so, so fun. So these are the 2 sizes. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on the quilted ottoman, and I'll see you next time. Hey everyone, it's Misty. Thanks for watching at home. If you aren't already a part of our Missouri Star family, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell if you want a notification every time we release a new video. I'll see you next Monday on the newest episode of At Home.